The next thing, all right, let's get into a few of the things that I've stereo grouped. We recorded some tom, like a tribal kind of thing over the top. And let me show you that here in Logic, which is my tom group right here. As you can see, is going out 11 and 12, shows up on 11 and 12 in the console. I guess I should note that I've set my patch bays up, so when I set output 1 in Logic, it automatically shows up here on the monitor return, the monitor input on the board. So if I go out 2, shows up at 2, out 3, shows up at 3, and so on. I did that so I don't have to patch when I'm recording, because I want to, when I'm recording, this is split. So I have my faders going in, I have my monitors, like the mini faders basically, right? Mixing, or it's inline. Mixing, I can split it, and I can actually have 24 channels and 24 channels, which I'm not doing today. So I have channel 1 coming back to the monitor, and then I have to flip it up here on the console so it comes down on the fader. That way I can stay down here. But by setting up my patch bays that way, I don't have to use any patch cables for my outputs. It's just 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, 4 to 4, and so on. So here I've taken my tom group and come out 11 and 12 on the console. I am doing a little bit of EQ, a lot of EQ actually, here in the box, as well as a little more EQ from the console. I'm hitting it with a good old CLA 76. I love the blue stripe. I'm a big blue stripe fan anyway. Just, they have, I don't know, they're dirty. I like them. Now here are all, let me select here. These are all my tom tracks. I have 4 close mics right here, rack 1, rack 2, floor 1, floor 2. I have my overheads, and then I have both sets of rooms. And I'm using everything here. I'm using it all to create this tom sound. And then I'm grouping them right here to come out 11 and 12 and show up on the console on 11 and 12. So that, let's just hear that. Let me set this loop up here. And this starts in the middle of the tune. All right, so that's how the toms sound. Now you'll notice you hear a little bit of distortion or saturation. What I'm doing is, on my insert here, instead of putting compressors, I have my Overstayer Channel Amp mic pre's, because they have line inputs on them, and I love these. These are made by Jeff Terzo, you know, hand-wired here in Los Angeles. And I have the ability to add second or third harmonic distortion. So what I've done is I've set the input of the mic pre all the way up. So it's hitting the input transformer in the harmonic distortion circuit as hard as possible. And I'm attenuating the output of the mic pre. So I am going for color, for breakup, for distortion. And then it comes to my fader. Let me play it again without it. Notice it also changes the stereo image a little bit. It's a little bit wider when I run it through there. I'm also using the EQ on the channel amp with some 4K, a good amount of 4K actually. So I have EQ happening all over these toms to get them to sit in the way that I wanted. Now the next thing, you'll see up here, I got my tape up on my effects return. I'm using a TC Electronics, let me see what model the sucker is, an M350 reverb unit, which it's got a couple cool settings on it that I dig, and I'm running the toms through this reverb. sounds kind of crazy on its own. So it's going through a plate reverb, and then it's hitting a slapback delay all on that reverb unit. So now let's just go back to the dry tom. Get this in the right place. So it's adding, there's a lot of movement going there. So one last thing is I do have a little bit of automation going on right here, and this is just on the build. Into that last part, and I'm also not quite as loud with the toms on the end of the song as I am on the build when there's no drums going to the middle. So that takes care of all our percussion stuff. So we have a couple things going on the guitars. First, we have some big chords that are happening. Then at the end of the song, we have some left and right. Going along with our chords. And that creates our all our rhythm guitar stuff. Now the guitars are going to bus 3 and 4. So I'm using a lot of buses because it's easy to group things together. And on this bus, I have a pair of Golden Age Project Comp 54s, not compressing at all actually. I just like the mid-range and the upper mid-range on them for guitars. They make things cut nicely. They just have a cool thing on the guitars. Now the last guitar is the guitar solo. That is not going to our bus. That is just going straight to the master out. Another thing to note here, this is one of the, actually it's the only mono track that I'm actually setting my levels and everything from in the box. I am using EQ on the console, but I've just set, I have my line in at Unity and I have my fader at Unity. And the volume, let's go to the guitar solo right here. Well, I'm not even, actually, I ended up not using the automation on there. But I am doing my sends here. So I have a little bit of EQ rolling off the bottom. Good old blue stripe, gotta love it. And then I'm sending to 3 different effects. So I have 7, 11, and 12. Let's go over here. Okay, so 7 is a short delay. That is 43 on one side, 69 on the other. This is not really, this isn't even long enough to be a slapback. This is just creating some space around it. Then I have a bit of a space designer going. And then I have my random delay from the Lexicon. I love the Lexicon stuff. Now this stuff, I have a stereo track here on 21 and 22. All my effects that are coming from Logic are coming back here to 21 and 22. So in Logic, I'm just setting the outputs of those aux channels to 21 and 22, shows up on 21, 22. So all of those effects are here. And I am doing a little bit of EQ. I'm rolling off, I have the 50 hertz high pass filter, rolling off some 300 or so, and I'm giving a little bit of, actually shelf at 15K. So if we hear that with the guitar solo. So that way all my effects from Logic are grouped in one spot. And then I have all my analog outboard effects coming up on my effects returns. Now, the last thing in this setup is all the loops and pads that are going on. And that is all of this stuff here that you see. And all of this, I decided, instead of trying to spread it out anymore on the console, it comes up on 2324. So you'll see I have a track group right here. Pull it up here. Boom. Going out right here, 23 and 24. Shows up on the console on 2324. All my levels, everything, EQs I'm sending to a, I believe it's another Lexicon bus 13. Yeah, it's a Lexicon Hall. All this stuff's getting the same reverb, which comes out on my Logic Effects group, which is channel 21 and 22. And that way it kept that easy. That stuff is really only in the middle and the beginning that you really hear it. The rest of it is kind of, it's just filler around the guitars and everything. Now, there's one last thing in my effects chain here, and that's my master. That I am sending to an Allen Smart C1. And that setting is, I have a ratio at 10, my attack is at 10, and it's on auto release. That then feeds a Tone Lux EQ 5P EQ. It's a touch of bottom. It's rolling off some of 300, 350 right in there. A touch of, where do I have it? Around 5K. And then a touch of, I'm putting about 4 dB of about 20K in there. But the bottom, the low mid, and the mid range is just, it's either pushing 2 or pulling 2. It's not drastic. It's just enough to, it kind of massages it a little bit. And then the final thing in that chain is a Tone Lux TX5C. Only getting a couple dB there. The Allen Smart is actually hitting pretty hard, because I liked it, got a little crunchy, and I kind of just dug it. So I left it that way. And then the TX5C is just maybe 3 dB at the max. The thing I like about, I love the way the Allen Smart pushes the mid-range, especially for snares and guitars, and I like how the TX5C can just contain transients without killing it, and it's a pretty cool combo. Now, that's not on the master insert. I am using the master fader. I'm going out in my patch bay of the master outs, and then I'm feeding that, the Allen Smart, the EQ5P, and the TX5C. That is then going into Logic on channel. You can see down here, I've made quite a few different bounces. These are all the different bounces I've made. And it's coming in on channel, where's my input? 2324. And that, again, that's being fed from, it goes master output, patch bay feeds it to the Allen Smart C1, to the Tone Lux EQ5P, to the Tone Lux TX5C, then to the input of my Motus, which is, I always use 2324 for whatever reason. And then I'm going out, as you can see here, out 2526. This again goes to the patch bay and gets patched into the 2-track return here on the console. You can see this yellow button right here. That way I can monitor exactly what's getting printed back into Logic. I can even put, any mastering plugins if I want to see what's going to happen without actually printing that stuff. But I get to monitor everything that's happening here, including my 2-bus chain. I can monitor that with this 2-track. And that's real important. That way I know exactly what it sounds like when it's getting printed. So that's the basic setup for this mix. And this isn't the only way I do this. Sometimes I may just put everything at Unity and use it as a giant summing mixer with maybe just using the EQ. This mix turned out that I liked doing it more, having my hands on the faders out here. So what's this sucker sound like? Let's find out. Right now, as you can see down here, I'm not recording, I'm using the monitor input so I can just hear. And that way it sends it back out to my 2-track return. So here's what this track sounds like. Boom, so there you have it. This is nice and short. Again, this is for a new promo video that we're getting ready to put out for the studio, so it's not meant to be a long track. But that is, like I said, this is one way that I do mix analog, so I'm using the outputs in Logic that go out my I/O that show up on the console, and I do as much of my work out here as I can. But like you've seen here, I do have some spots with the Logic effects, with grouping like loops and pads together, you know, or grouping my room mics. I make those decisions inside the box where I can use some automation and things to my advantage that way. I do use the subgroups out here on the console for drums, for guitar, that sort of thing, as well as some analog reverbs. Yeah, that's it. Anyway, if you got any questions, let me know. All right, guys, see you around.